G'day. This is just a supplementary video on some alternative ways to make up the blocks for the Gower drill grinder. Most of the bits and pieces can be made from bits of flat or all that sort of thing with, you know, drill press, lathe and a file, but the blocks are actually, as they are drawn, are you know, a large chunk of metal which really does benefit from a mill, but there are ways around it. Most of this build you've been able to get away with not having a mill if you haven't got one. There's a little bit of file work involved, but nothing terribly arduous. But the two blocks do really benefit from having a mill. But there are alternatives as well, and so I thought I'd just run through this with you. This is the start of the back block. Now I've got that on a bit of strip, 3x20. That's all I need, and the reason for that is that I'm going to start with putting a couple of studs in, like so. That one's a bit awkward. That's better. And this is an M5 bolt. I've cut it down to about the right size and then taken the galvanising off the or the zinc plating off the head. So I'm going to put those in there. I'm going to tack those in place. And the reason for that tacking is I don't want to get any weld up here, and I don't want to get any weld protruding over the surface here. So I'm just going to sort of put a couple of tacks on there just to hold them in place, and then you'll see what happens next. So as you can see, I've just put a tack in 3 places there. I don't want anything on this surface, or above this surface, sorry, and I don't want anything that's going to interfere with that. The heads of these buttons need to be sized so that there's a 3mm gap between the top of the button and the edge of the plate, and then a second bit of flat gets welded on like that, and that'll take that out to 23. That takes that to 19, which is not a bad thing. The drawing calls that up for 17, and that leaves that just a little bit shy of what I'd be comfortable with. You know, I think the prototype was designed or was made correctly with slightly thicker material, but you know, it is what it is. So the next thing I've got is a piece of square material here, and that's going to go in there, and that's the block for the M5 through hole. By the way, I'm leaving these long just to give myself something to hang on to. I've now got my bit of square stuff in place. I've put a decent weld along this edge. Over here I've just re-tacked because, and I've had to come along and grind that tack out because I've now got a little bit of angle which I'm going to be putting in there. Okay, once I've got that done, I can then, you know, weld in other places and reinforce things, but this is basically, you know, to get the lip on the front, and then there'll be a bit of grinding and cutting and all the other fun things we do, but you'll have a basic block that you can use. Now once I've trimmed off the back there and put that little notch in, that's important by the way, because when that sits in the banjo and is right up the front there, that's the bit that clears the bolt that's in there, so that notch does need to be there. But basically there's an assembly which is ready for, you know, doing a little bit of drilling and tapping. I think if I was doing this for real, I probably would have put the V in there before I welded this on, but apart from that, that's a minor thing. But yes, you can fabricate these things if you want to. Well, you might say, that's all right for that other bit, but what about this funny shaped bit here? How am I going to do that? Well, first of all, let me introduce you to these. These are a set of sheet metal locking pliers, and they've been modified. Not by me, but it's quite a clever little thing. They've disconnected here and put some countersunk holes in there, and then put a plate on with a little hinged section. Putting them back the way they should be, it means you can clamp them together and then use this part here as a sort of a folding brace. So the minimum that you can fold on that is 10mm around into a, you know, square U shape. So I've remarked this out in 10mm increments. with lots of thumping and banging and crunching and manipulating and pliers and these things playing and all that sort of stuff, you know the drill. I've got that M shape there. So the important thing there is that edge there is sort of centered on the V. That's roughly a 90-degree V there. These two sides are parallel, but what I'll be able to do now is trim that down, probably weld a piece over the back to stiffen it and keep it there. I can put some holes in there like that I can then bolt that onto, and on this side I can put some holes to do the swing gate if that's what I want to do, or I can weld a piece of stuff on there. So I'll do a little bit more work on this just to show that yes, it will behave itself. But you know, this is a possibility. If you don't want to go machining that, you haven't got a mill, you don't want to spend lots of time with a file, it is possible to make something out of sheet metal, because all this part is doing really is supporting that drill. As long as you get your holes in the right spot and your V in the right spot, that'll match up with this. You can do a similar trick as I did with making the previous one, is that in this case I'd start with the V, put that up, work out where the V in this part needs to be, and go from there. And that would be something along the lines of about there. Right, so you get the two parts lined up and off you go. So you can make that out of sheet metal if you wanted to. There's probably other ways of doing it, so maybe some strips and cut some V's in. The only important thing is that because you're talking a drill bit here, you can't just have a V, because if you're unlucky in your positioning, it could be that part of that V slips down here, it'll kick the drill bit off centre. So you do need a flat surface, but there's ways you can do that. You could probably fabricate that with some bits of strip as well if you wanted to. All sorts of things. So here's the sheet metal variant. I've only put I put covers front and back to strengthen it up. I should have relieved that away that way, but because this is only a sort of a roughie just to show what I'm thinking about, what I'm meaning, it'll do for the moment. What can you say about that? Well, because it's hollow, you can put the two holes there and there, and you can also put the hole or the mount on the other side for the little bail that flips down. The only thing to remember with these is the distance from here to the middle of that V is critical, and from the middle of that V to the top surface of the banjo, simply because that's how that one relates. So provided you get that matched up, you're okay. So basically that surface there and that surface there have to coincide, and when these are all where they should be, that V has to coincide. Okay. This one here's, well, it's not finished, it needs to be lopped off there a little bit, but this is the same thing fabricated out of bits of 3mm flat. So you can do something similar. I haven't done end pieces on this because it doesn't need it from the strength point of view. Those welds are plenty strong enough to hold it rigid. I just started out with a V piece and then added a side there, added a bit of flat across here, then added another piece there. Once again, it's that relationship between, you know, the V and where they sit that's important. So yeah, if you don't want to, machine something out of solid, whether you haven't got a mill or you don't like it, or too much work with the file, whatever, you can do things with sheet metal or even with steel flat. You can fabricate that up, because all this has got on it is a couple of holes, two here for mounting and one here for the bail, and that's easy, right? And you can do that with both of those. So yes, back to our regular programming.